Welcome to week 2 of our course. This week we are looking at what is the Trim Healthy Mama plan. If you're here on this course, then you've pretty much guaranteed to have heard of the Trim Healthy Mama plan, and that's probably what you've come here for. You've maybe read the book, or you've read a bit online, or you've even tried the plan, or you've used it and it's worked for you and you're coming back to it again. There could be lots of reasons, but you're already aware of the Trim Healthy Mama plan, and you want to know a little bit more about it and what it does. So, a basic overview of the Trim Healthy Mama plan. The basic premise of this plan is that you're trying to separate out the fuels that you give your body so that you can get different results from the food that you eat. So if you think of food as being a fuel, then what you're trying to do is you're trying to give your body just one type of fuel at a time so that your body can use that fuel up. And then when it uses that for energy and runs out of that energy, it will then turn to burning your own body fat. And that's how you get your trim part. And if you do that with really healthy food sources, that's how you get your healthy part. So that's the very, very basics of it. And then we can also put those fuels together so that if you have two fuel types at one time, so that your body doesn't have chance to turn to burning its own body tissue, its own adipose fat tissue, then you would maintain your weight. So obviously that would be helpful for those who are at goal weight. And that can also slow down your weight loss as well. So for those that lose too quickly, for those that have a higher need for energy, like people who are working physically hard, growing children, teenagers, those who are pregnant or breastfeeding. And we also have the ability to have meals with no fuel source at all. And these can sometimes help rev the metabolism, but we have to be a little bit careful with those. And we will learn about that a little bit later in the week. But if you keep thinking about fuels, this will help you to work out what we're going to do on this Trim Healthy Mama plan. So what do we mean by fuels? So fuels is the energy that we give to our bodies through food. We think of two main fuels. We think of fat as being one and carbohydrates being another. Most of us are really aware of good fats and getting plenty of those into our diets. Some of us can be a little bit hesitant about carbohydrates, but we will learn the importance of them on this plan, and we will learn how important it is to give your body carbohydrates and be able to fuel your muscles and your body through them. So don't worry about them, but we're going to do them in a really healthy way with really healthy sources. So the fuel is just that. It's what you put into your body that enables it to power it. And like we've already said, we use these fuels to be able to keep our bodies going, but also to be able to trigger fat burning for ourselves. The reason fuels are so important is that we all need energy. It would be lovely if we could just have meals that didn't have a fuel source at all, and let our bodies just burn our own body fat, our own body tissue. But we can't do that, because when we try to do that, and if you've ever been on a really low calorie diet, you will have experienced this. Our bodies panic and think that they're being starved. They think that they're being malnourished. And so our bodies actually hold on even harder to all that fat tissue, because our bodies panic and they want to protect us and they want to keep us healthy, and they want to absolutely guarantee that there is some kind of fuel there for it. So like I say, if you've ever done a sort of crash diet or a really tightly controlled calorie diet, or if you've tried Trim Healthy Mama before and you've really stuck to the fuel pull meals, which are the ones with no fuel at all, then you will find that your body kind of grinds to a halt, and can't do anything because it just holds on to what it's got, thinking it's going through a period of starvation. So these fuels are really important, because this is how we're going to nourish our body, and this is how our bodies will then be healthy enough and able to let go of any excess weight that we're holding, so that we can find our trim. So like I said, our fuels are our fats and our carbohydrates, both healthy fats and healthy carbohydrates. And that's really important. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But the basis of this plan is our fuels and how we combine them with other things in order to get the results that we want, which is finding our trim and finding our healthy. So what does a basic meal look like? So a basic meal on the Trim Healthy Mama plan is always anchored with protein. What that means is you always have a protein source in every meal. This helps to keep you full, it helps to keep you satisfied, and it's something to add those fuels to. So your basic protein can be things like cheese, it can be meats, it can be pulses, it can be things like all sorts of dairy products, things like this that are a good protein source. And it's different protein sources depending on what kind of meal that you're going to build. You then want to add in your fuel source or fuel sources, or no fuel source at all, depending on what kind of meal you're trying to go for. So our S meals, which we'll learn about in a lot more detail tomorrow, have fat added as their fuel. So when you eat an S meal, the fuel that you will be giving your body is good, healthy fats. And that's what your body will burn before hopefully turn into your own body fat to burn. An E meal, which stands for energizing, is the meal where carbohydrate is your main fuel. So you would have your protein, you would have your healthy carbohydrates. Your crossover meal, which is your meal where you have two fuel sources, is your meal where you would have both healthy fats and healthy carbohydrates. Your fuel pull meal, which I just mentioned briefly, is the one where you don't have any primary fuel source. So you're going with your proteins and no primary fuel source. Also on your plate, you're going to want to fill up with lots of leafy greens, non-starchy vegetables. These are all things that don't have a fuel source, so they can be used with the S and E meals. And just mean that you've got something to really fill you up. And of course, a lot of these leafy greens and vegetables are full of vitamins, they're full of minerals. They're things that are really going to nourish your body, and they're going to give your body what it needs to feel nourished enough to be able to let go of that fat tissue. So we've got our S meal, which is satisfying with fats. We've got our E meals, which are energizing with carbohydrates. We've got our crossovers, where we cross over both fuels. And we've got our fuel pull, where we don't have a primary fuel at all. And like I said, don't worry about learning all these at the moment. We're going to look at them in a lot more detail this week. This is just kind of giving you a basic overview. And so that's what a basic meal would look like. You're going to want to build it up with these building blocks of a protein, a fuel source, and then filling up with lots of your leafy greens and your non-starchy vegetables. So how easily can I get started? You can get started as easily or as complicated as you like. The easiest way to get started is to go for things like meat and vegetable meals. So you can use your meat as your protein source and as your fuel source if you're going for an S meal, because many meats are full of really good, healthy animal fats. And then you can add in your vegetables, or you can go really complicated if you want to, and you can start looking at different ingredients, and you can look at fancy recipes, and you can get the cookbooks out, and you can have a look at lots and lots of different ideas, and you can try and replicate meals that you already do, and you can try things that are new. So you really can make it as easy or as complicated as you want to. And some people like complicated, and some people enjoy cooking, and some people want to keep it really, really simple. And there's nothing wrong with either of those. And it's also good if you want to start simple and then work up to something a bit more. That's entirely up to you. But you do not need special ingredients to get started. You do not need to spend a fortune on fancy products. You do not need to have jars and jars of all different funny things that you can't pronounce or understand. You can just start with meat, with cheese, with dairy products, with vegetables, with sweet potatoes, with brown rice, and all these easily affordable, frugal items that are readily available and that we all recognize. And then you can get as complicated as you want later. Are there foods I'll need to avoid? Yes. So what we're trying to do is get as healthy as possible, which means that we are going to avoid certain foods. And these would then be off-plan foods, as we call them. So the main one you're going to want to avoid is sugar. Sugar triggers so many different reactions within the body, raising blood sugar levels so that insulin kicks in, which has all sorts of detrimental effects on the body. Sugar also makes us store body fat, and obviously we're trying to avoid that. So you're going to want to avoid sugar, things like white refined flour, white rice, really anything that's going to elevate your blood sugars. Because the other thing that we're trying to do with Trim Healthy Mama is we're trying to keep our blood sugars down as low as possible, because as I said, when we have that insulin reaction kick in, then it can cause all sorts of different health problems. Whereas when we try and keep our energy levels stable throughout the day, we avoid that afternoon slump. We avoid that struggle where you want to reach for sweet things in an afternoon. We avoid all those problems of needing caffeine to prop ourselves up. If our energy level is just stable through the day and we're not triggering any kind of reaction within the body, then our body has a chance to be as healthy as possible. So, like I say, you're going to want to avoid white flour, white rice, anything that's refined like that, sugars, any sort of refined carbohydrates. But there are substitutes to all of these, and we will explore that again as we go through this course. We will explore the different substitutes that you can use, or like we said previously, you can keep it really, really simple. That's up to you. Is there anything else I need to know? So the only other things that you need to know is, like I say, you can make this as easy or as complicated as you want to. You're going to need to cut out a few things, but you can choose whether to do that in one go, or you can do that starting with one meal at a time and working through all those things. And there are lots of resources available to help you with the Trim Healthy Mama plan. There are two, I think now, possibly three cookbooks, if you count the original book, which half of it was a cookbook. So there are plenty of recipes out there. There is plenty of things online as well, with resources like Pinterest, where you can find recipes. So you can start to build up a collection. We've already talked about cutting out things like the refined carbs, things like that, but there are many products that are on plan, and that again is something that we'll explore in course. There are what's known as Franken foods, which is foods that you can add in that have been made that are not necessarily optimum for health, but they are on plan. The only other thing that I would say that's really important to know is that ingredients will always trump numbers on this plan. So tomorrow, when we look at what S&E meals are, and the day after when we look at what crossovers and fuel pools are, you will learn that there are some numbers behind these meals. It's not something that we need to focus on. It's not something that we need to spend a lot of time on, but those numbers are there. And it is possible to look at some foods and make them fit the plan. And by that, I mean, you can look at the numbers and you can sort of reduce quantities and you can put them together with other things. And technically, the numbers all add up and the food is on plan. However, the ingredients are not optimal. They will raise blood sugars and they will cause the body to stall. And so, what I'm saying is, your ingredients matter far more than the numbers. So if you're a person that's into detail, don't worry, we will look at those numbers and we will look at the science behind these things. But if you're not into the numbers and you don't like having to learn lots of things and learn portion sizes and learn how many grams of this or that you should be having, then that's brilliant, because you will actually do better if you're not focusing on all those things all the time and you're instead focusing on the actual food that you're eating. Because more than anything else, you want to be making sure that whatever it is that you eat, the ingredients you make it from are nourishing you. And we will keep using that word nourishing over and over again throughout this course, whether we're looking at the Trim Healthy Mama plan or any other way of eating. Our focus at Trim Lifestyle is to nourish the body, to be able to give it the things that it needs to be as healthy as possible, because when a body is healthy, it will happily let go of excess weight. Because it just doesn't need to hold it. It just doesn't feel the need to hold it. So that's the Trim Healthy Mama plan basic overview. The rest of this week, we will be looking at the different meal types. So I've mentioned SE, crossover and fuel pool. We've also got some other meal types that are a little bit more obscure that we will look at, and we will be looking at how to make it work for us. Don't panic if at first it doesn't seem too obvious or it feels a little bit complicated. It will fall into place. It always, always does if you keep going. And it's okay to make mistakes. The wonderful thing about fuel separating, any kind of fuel separating, whether it's Trim Healthy Mama, whether it's Somersizing, whether it's anything else, is that if you give your body just one form of fuel and you separate those fuels out, then you will always lose weight. And if you do that with healthy ingredients, then you will always get healthy as well. It doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be difficult. And we're with you every single step of the way to make sure that you're able to do this. See you tomorrow.